Hey Luke, do you like Spider-Man?
No.
Cool. Me neither. But
Do
here's
you
some
know?
news.
Do you know
Oh,
why? Do you know why? Because he's too woke.
Oh, in that case, I have some wonderful news for you. Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man star, Hudson Thames, says biggest fear was it would be, quote, annoying and woke. So this is, I guess, like an animated Spider-Man. Apparently, the Spider-Man can be animated now. And
Yeah.
this is the star of that show.
I mean, what a stupid name. First of all, Hudson Thames. What?
Yeah, because that's like two rivers.
Your parents. So I think. Well, we got to name him after two rivers because just one river that won't make sense. So we got to call him Hudson as well.
Yeah, it's like when people have two first names except more stupid.
Yeah, it's like a lot more stupid. Spider-Man is just a superhero who helps people. I mean,
yeah, that is pretty. Yeah. That's kind of a woke thing to do. What if he helps a minority who's being beaten by the police?
I know. There's some good tweets because Harry Osborn and Norman Osborn, they're black in the show. And there's this funny tweet where Spider-Man is turning into one of the Osborns. And it's like, you know what? I think this neighborhood would be a bit more friendly if your family moved out. Because
yes, they should have an episode where he chokes someone to death on the New York subway. Hello and welcome to Select and Reflect, the movie review podcast where we look at films that have come out in the near and distant past, we give them a couple of watches, and evaluate them beyond first impressions. I'm your host Michael, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Luke, and this week we are celebrating the release of... Well, sorry, no we're not. We're celebrating the Oscars. I'm sorry, I was in autopilot mode for a second. We are celebrating the forthcoming Academy Awards, and we're going to be looking at every single film nominated for Best Picture in this coming Oscars. Of course, in the past, we've looked at it retrospectively from last year, but we've decided we should be a bit more on the pulse, as they say. So, insofar as we're able to, we're going to be looking at these films, and in this case, we were able to. We're looking at two films which are connected, and I won't give the films away right now, but there's I think a kind of a religious theme going on would be the main thing that connects them. And the first film we're going to be talking about is Dune Part 2. So Luke, why don't you tell us a thing or two about Dune Part 2?
Yes, Michael. So just before we get into it, like you said, this is exciting because we've never reviewed the forthcoming Best Picture Oscar movies before the Oscars.
Have we ever? Because I'm just thinking
yes.
So we've never. Because I'm thinking like remember when we reviewed? No, maybe we haven't. Because I was gonna say when we reviewed like Get Out way back.
I'll answer if you'll let me. Yeah.
Okay.
So Get Out is one of those movies, but also last year we reviewed Oppenheimer before the Oscars last year.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, just because I thought I really liked Oppenheimer, I didn't want to wait a year. And yeah, it won Best Picture. But yeah, we're doing all the Best Picture nominees. Some will come actually after the Oscars on March the 2nd. But yeah, we're going to look at two of the Best Picture nominees today: Dune Part 2 and also Conclave. And yeah, like you say, there's a religious theme because I was trying to pair up the movies and I was left with Dune Part 2 and Conclave. And I was like, well, what connects these two movies? One's like a sci-fi thriller and one's, like a movie about the Pope. And I was like, is there a connection? I was like, oh yeah, the whole like religious thing, the whole chosen one.
Yeah. You know what? Like I would actually believe you if you told me these were the first two movies you paired up.
Yeah. So I paired up like Anora and the Substance, for instance, and the other one was Emilia Perez and Wicked. And yeah, I was like, oh yeah, Dune and Conclave, is there? Oh yeah, yes, of course there is a connection. And in one movie, Victor Benitez ascends to the special position, and in the movie we are about to review, it's Paul Atreides get to their positions in different ways, shall we say?
Yes, they do, yes.
Yes, but let's talk about Dune Part 2 first. So, it is a 2024 epic space opera film directed by Denis Villeneuve. I said his name correctly this time. I
as a habit say his name wrong, and I refuse to change.
No, I've always said Villeneuve because, of course, my F1 knowledge allows me to get his name right. But the Denis part, I think I've previously called him Denis, like that.
Okay, see, I've called him Villeneuve because that's the kind of guy I am.
We went through this last time. We reviewed Dune Part 1, as it is now. Yeah, and it's Villeneuve because that's Jacques Villeneuve and the other one, Gilles Villeneuve. That's how their names were pronounced. They were French-Canadian, so Denis, I assume it's the same, so that's what I'm going to call him. Anyway, so, of course, it is the sequel to Dune, which came out 3 years ago, well, 4 years ago now, in 2021. Of course, like I said, it's directed by Denis Villeneuve. The screenplay is by Denis Villeneuve. It is based on Dune by Frank Herbert, and it stars there's a lot of starring here. Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Josh Brolin, Austin Butler, Florence Pugh, Dave Bautista, Christopher Walken, Léa Seydoux, Stellan Skarsgård, Charlotte Rampling, and Javier Bardem. It was released on March the 1st, 2024 in the United States, so yeah, just under a year ago. And Michael, can you tell me what the budget was for Dune Part 2?
Now, am I allowed to know what the budget was for Dune Part 1?
It was like 150 million or something.
Okay, well, I'm just going to say that this film was 180 million.
Yeah, 190.
Okay.
So yeah, a lot of money, but how much did it rake in at the box office?
I'm going to say that this film... Now, again, am I allowed to know how much the first film raked in at the box office?
Well, the first one came out in a year which was influenced still
by COVID, okay.
Affected, by the pandemic. I believe it was only like 300 to 400 million. So yeah, but I think it probably would have done better.
Yeah, now I know this film did well enough that they were happy to release that they are making Part 3, so that's very nice for them.
Well, it's not Part 3.
Yes, it's Dune Messiah, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, cool. So, as for how much this film made, I mean, the fact that you're saying even when it was affected by COVID, it, made 300 million. Obviously, I do realize, I think the first film would probably have done slightly better than the next film, just because, people are like, oh, it's Dune, a new thing. Fuck it, I'm going to say... Well, this could still be too low. I'm prepared myself, but...
It's going to be too low.
Okay, in that case, I'm going to go 100 million higher. No, God. Okay, so let's say this film made 650 million.
Still too low.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, because you the thing is, you don't pay attention to pop culture. You just live.
I had no idea that anyone was watching this film.
You live under a rock because yours truly went to see this, and because you refused to venture out of your home. It was pretty good seeing it in IMAX. Let me tell you.
Yeah, do I have an IMAX near me though?
No, because you live in a poor area.
Yeah, I live in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, you don't live in a wealthy metropolis like I do.
I know, it sucks.
Yeah, so Dune Part 2 grossed $714 million, and I knew it would be quite high because you could not get tickets to the IMAX. It was 70mm IMAX, by the way. Yes, you could not get tickets to that particular movie theatre for weeks. But I tell you what, me and my buddy, we managed to get great tickets right at the top, so we were right in the middle of the screen.
Oh, lovely.
On a Saturday night, and yeah, that was it was a great experience, and I'm kind of letting my thoughts on the movie show. But I'll ask you first, Michael. Did you like Dune Part 2? I
did like this film. I have criticisms, and what was I going to say? I will say also, we should mention, I rewatched Dune Part 1 because I thought I should, seeing as it's two parts, I'll give it a rewatch. And I would renew and expand upon the criticism we had at the time of, it did feel like it was just a whole load of build-up. But yeah, as for this film, I mean...
Well, can I correct you there?
Yes.
I did not criticise the movie for the build-up.
Oh, maybe I just assume, retroactively, I just assume you agree on everything.
Well, you didn't either, by the way.
Oh, did I not criticize it for that?
No.
Okay, well, guess what? That was having just rewatched it. That was my number one criticism.
The criticism of Dune Part 1, from my point of view, and yours kind of as well, but I was more firm in this, was that the build-up was good because the tension about whether House Atreides would manage to produce spice so the Emperor would be satisfied.
Oh, and then they just get cucked or dumped on, I should say.
And then an hour, 20 minutes in the Harkonnens attack. And I was like, wait, I was enjoying the tension of, oh shit, are House Atreides going to accomplish this? Are they going to, fend off the walls that are closing in on them? Arrakis is this poison chalice, but were they going to survive? And the answer was no. And then after 1 hour 20, the movie kind of died and the tension was gone because it was just Paul escaping and finding the Fremen, and it was kind of anticlimactic, the last part of the movie. So the build-up was good. I wish it happened, or wish it went on for longer. And you kind of agreed, but you didn't, you weren't as, strong on that as I was.
Yeah, and I think on reflection, I would agree with that more. And I guess that's kind of what I mean, because I agree with you. It's not so much that the film was just all build up, or it's rather that the build up at the beginning was good, but then obviously in the second half it wasn't building up to anything except for this film. I will now just so that it's laid out there, I'll substantiate my two big criticisms of this Part 2. One, I feel like. So really, there's two aspects of the film. How does Paul Atreides feel about being the Messiah, and how is these Fremen, how are they going to take over the planet? And
God,
both
you
those
can't
things.
even say their name correctly.
What is it, Fremen?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's not
fine.
like they
I'll
don't say
say
it like fucking
Fremen.
100 times in the movie.
Sometimes I was something else recently where I was just knowingly. Oh, I know what it was. It was the word pensieve from in Harry Potter. I think it's actually pronounced pensive.
Okay.
But I've just pronounced it pensieve, and I just do that anyway. Whether or not the Fremen were going to take over, and my big issue, spoiler alert, is that Paul Atreides just takes some potions, and suddenly he goes from being completely against the idea of being the Messiah to suddenly he's 100% on board with it and giving Anakin and Michael speech. And then obviously, similar with the Fremen suddenly taking over, it's like, oh, they've got millions of them the whole time and they can just do it. That's my beef with the plot.
That was always explained.
Well, I know they said millions in part 1, but
no, in part 2, that's what they said.
Well, I know, yeah. Sorry, I'm saying like I know that it's always been the case there have been millions, but that I don't like that.
What do you mean you don't like it?
I don't like that there's millions of. Well, it's not I don't like there's millions of Fremen. I just feel like it was way too easy in the end. Like essentially, the movie is just about they don't like that the Harkonnens are there, so then they decide to go and kill them all.
Right, you were paying attention. I know you were. Do you know why the Fremen could storm the Harkonnen base on Arrakis? Do you know, what was the key thing that they acquired, which meant they could do it? Which they
the nuclear weapons.
Exactly.
Yes, but I will say I also found that to be a bit of a a bit of a what's the word? Kind of the opposite to a Chekhov's gun, where I was like, oh, they just have nukes now.
Well, it makes sense because they did. I mean, the Atreides house would have a lot of powerful weapons, so I don't have a problem with that. And Gurney showing up and telling him about it, Paul about it, that makes sense. So I don't have an issue with that. But the first thing you said about Paul taking the water of life and then becoming a completely different person, I'll talk about that. And again, I don't want to make it seem like I don't want to criticize this movie, because watching it in the theater on 170mm IMAX
was very impressive.
Sorry, not 170, just 70mm IMAX. It was impressive. And you come out of the movie and you're like, wow, that was incredible. And to be fair, I think that's what Denis Villeneuve wanted to achieve. He put a lot of effort, again, into the production design, but into the spectacle, the action set pieces. The scale is big, it's epic. It's a great movie to watch in the setting that I watched it. Having seen it on my laptop, where you just have to focus on the plot more, you can't focus on the spectacle as much, and of course you have already seen it, you already know what's happening. You focus again more on the characters, you focus more on the plot, and you start to think to yourself, wait a minute, this isn't as good as I remembered. It's not as powerful as because that's the thing. I think these directors, and Denis Villeneuve is one of them, they're like, we just want to take you on a ride, we just want to take you on a ride at the cinema and you'll have a great time, and forget about anything else, forget about, the plot, forget about the nitpicks. That's not cinema, Cinema is when the sandworm comes out of the, of the sandstorm and it's like a big wah, and, that's what happens. And it's an epic moment. And there are several other epic moments, some great shots, But actually, there are some questions I have about this movie, and I don't think it's as good as when I watched it in the cinema. Because you're just forced to confront what is happening more. And I think Denis Villeneuve, again, it makes sense as well, but given what Denis Villeneuve, what he puts emphasis on, that I would have this opinion as well. I'm still going to be influenced in my head, because again, a movie is not just,
it's not just a home release.
It's not just meant to be consumed, on your laptop. It's meant to be also
I watched this on my phone.
watched at the cinema. So I am going to, in my rating, take into account when I saw it for the first time and kind of mash the two ratings together that I would give it.
Yeah, I can respect that. I will say, I did want to see this film at the cinema. The big problem is I would have had to go with my gash, and she hadn't seen part 1. And suddenly when it was like, if it was just like, oh, go see part 2, but then I was like, oh, we should watch part 1. And then just something about having to organize collectively watching part 1 on my laptop. I just kept putting it off. I mean, I know it's like a bad excuse. Like I made that sound as if actually I have a really good excuse, and the excuse was I couldn't be bothered to, like, the excuse why I wasn't going to pay like 20 or like 40 quid in total and go out is that I couldn't be bothered to turn on my laptop and watch a movie for free.
Okay,
and that's not a good excuse.
Yeah,
I just want it on the record. That's the reason, and I think that should be considered valid.
It sounds like you hate your wife.
Well, also there's the fact that my wife isn't a nerd, so she wasn't like super into the idea of watching Dune. Like she was like, oh yeah, maybe.
I mean,
but,
you could have just seen it yourself. That is the option.
Yeah, that is true. But then I felt like she'd nag me. You know what wives are like. She'd be like, why did you? Then like then she'd be like, oh, I see. So like going to the movies, do you? Well, how about this Wicked, that's coming out? And
Well, I mean, that would have been several months later, and as well, it's meant to be a pretty good movie.
Yeah, apparently it is. Yeah,
I mean, it's nominated for Best Picture. Yeah. But yeah, let's get into nitpicks. How many do you have?
I've got one.
Go on.
So it's basically just the fact that Stilgar, I'm remembering names. I hope his name's Stilgar, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is like, hey, going out in the desert, you got to watch out. There are trapdoor spiders. And I know what trapdoor spiders are. They're the spiders that like hide under like a rock or something, and they got like a trapdoor. But I was like thinking, the way he was saying it was if they're really scary. I was like, oh, these are gonna be like some giant things. And I was thinking, oh, there's gonna be like a scene where someone's gonna get attacked by some giant spiders. And obviously, any film where people get attacked by giant spiders, like that's just really exciting. Like giant insects in general.
Yeah, but I think you could tell it was a throwaway comment.
Yeah, but I was just like, so it's not really. It's just that I was disappointed. Like personally,
Okay,
like when
fine.
he said that line, I was like, oh, I want to see someone get killed by some giant spiders. And
Okay, yeah. So my lit pick, by the way, that's what it is. I'm going to talk about something which still has a cultural impact to this day, I think, which is the Dune popcorn bucket. Because I don't know if you recall, images of a Dune-themed popcorn bucket went viral and became an internet meme after its sandworm design was compared to an artificial vagina. Marvel announced afterwards a bucket of their own for Deadpool and Wolverine, and I'm sure you've maybe seen that, I don't know.
I have seen the Deadpool and Wolverine bucket.
You've seen the Dune bucket, of course.
You know what? I actually haven't seen the Dune bucket.
You actually live under a rock.
Dune popcorn bucket. Let's see.
Yeah, this confirms what I was saying before even more. Just the evidence stacks up.
I say it looks more like a butthole than a vagina.
Okay, well, that's your opinion. But yeah, basically, Villeneuve said that the Deadpool and Wolverine buckets did not compare favourably to Dune's. He said the Dune bucket was one of a kind. So there you go.
Yeah. Like that seems like it's like trying to make Barbenheimer happen again.
Yeah, it's impossible. The Dune popcorn bucket is quite unique. So let us get into the plot now.
Absolutely, Luke. Dune Part 2 follows Paul Atreides as he unites with the Fremen on the planet of Arrakis to wage war against Aus Arcanen.
Again, I think what I've said before is correct. Well, obviously, but the size and scale of this movie is fantastic, and Villeneuve hasn't focused so much on the plot. Paul worms his way into the Fremen.
Worms.
Yeah. And then, of course, reluctantly heads south before doing a 180 and embracing this fake prophecy. Which, again, the 180 is interesting, and we will talk about that. And again, it is kind of you can critique the movie for that, I think. But yeah, I found this one, from a plot perspective, again, on my laptop, focusing on this, not as interesting in some ways compared to the first, because in the first there's more geopolitical machinations, which is a phrase that I love to use. That was going on in the first quite a bit. Our Atreides, the Atreides have been given Arrakis. Are they going to be able to, increase spice production before, the pressure builds and the Harkonnens attack them? Obviously not. But now in this movie, it's just Paul and the Fremen resisting the Harkonnens. Conducting this guerrilla warfare against them. And even in the end, with the politics, it's quite simple. There's nothing really that complicated about it. So yeah, I just found it less interesting from that perspective. What is meant to be interesting, I think, is Paul's character. In the first movie, Paul, his character, it wasn't focused on really, and I had some critiques about that in part one. This is really a lot about him, about him. That can be done well, but I can still have interest in that if it is done well, if it's effective. I'm not sure it was as effective as I'd like. But yeah, just in terms of the plot, I don't know if you appreciated the first one more because of the geopolitics or not.
Yeah, so absolutely. I agree with all of your bitching. And I would second it. Yeah, the thing is, the other thing I was thinking is that, like, the first movie for me, it made the universe feel much bigger. Because, well, I mean, the fact that you've got all these houses competing, this is like a vast empire and stuff like that. Whereas in this movie, it kind of feels like, because everything's converging on this one space, that also made it feel a bit more, well, just like I say, I guess made it feel less grand. But I would also agree with you that even just the way things are going down, it does seem a lot more simple. Like essentially, I was thinking about the what's it called, the Bene Gesserit, and they're like they're kind of like, oh, we're operating things from behind the scenes, but literally the only thing they do is they're just like, hey, here's a guy who could maybe like be powerful. Let's see what he's into. Oh, it turns out he's into banging hot babes. And then like that's what they establish, and then like they don't really do anything with that information. So yeah, I would agree with basically every criticism you made, and unfortunately it sucks because obviously the main positive of this movie is that hey, it looks really good while it's happening, which is not nothing. But the problem is obviously it's much harder to through a podcast medium communicate that the movie looks really good. So I worry that in talking about the plot I might sound like more of a negative Nancy. But anyway, so let's jump into the plot proper though.
Yes.
Following the destruction of House Atreides by House Harkonnen, Princess Irulan, the daughter of Emperor Shaddam IV, journals about her father's betrayal of the Atreides. I found this opening really interesting for two reasons, very briefly said. One, I kind of found it interesting that in the first film, the Emperor is like someone you don't see, and again, like it kind of adds to this idea of that there's like so many layers and it makes everything feel kind of more deep. So it was surprising to me, and I'm not saying like it's an objective criticism, but like based on what I was kind of like, oh, this is really interesting in like the first film, it kind of feels like, like I say, it adds layers and intrigue. The fact you just like see him and you're like, oh, it's just a guy. Yeah, not an objective criticism necessarily, but I was a bit like, oh, okay. And then the other
it's
thing
it's not just a guy, it's Christopher Walken.
Yeah. Yes, that is true, yeah. And which is kind of, I think he's a good choice for this Emperor.
Who is this Muad'Dib?
Yeah, and I feel like the princess is going to become way more important in the next film because it did seem a bit
she's going to be his wife, so
yes,
I think
yes.
so.
Yeah, so yeah, because yes, I know, but yeah, basically, it was kind of like it was an interesting choice to have her be like the initial POV character. Considering she's not that important to this film.
Well, yeah, she's basically acting as the narrator.
Yes.
And that's fine, I guess, because she does have a role to play. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about, of course, this whole thing starts because the Emperor basically betrayed House Atreides. He didn't like Duke Leto, whatever he's called, Atreides.
Yeah, Isaac Newton.
Yeah, Oscar Isaac Newton. But the question is why? And he says at the end of the movie he had a weak heart. Oh no, he was ruled by his heart, so that meant he was weak. And
but wouldn't that be a good thing if you're like an emperor? Don't you want someone who's like weak and easy to control?
Well, not really, because he can do rash things. You can't really control him if that's his if that's his style. But again, it's just so vague. It's just
yeah, that is true.
You wouldn't destroy a whole house because
just vibes.
just based on vibes. Okay, right. You're gonna have a better reason than that. Maybe he was plotting to overthrow the emperor or wanted to make some moves and do that. I don't know, but he doesn't say that. But again, the Bene Gesserit have a role to play in this, of course, and the Emperor could just be talking bollocks, and it could be all down to the Bene Gesserit, but that's just kind of unsatisfying, honestly, if that's the case. It's not clear why this happened, and it's quite important. Later on in the movie, also this character, what you call Irulan, she just assumes that Paul Atreides is this prophet on Arrakis. And I don't know, that'd be quite a bold assumption to make from my perspective. When you go, oh, who is this Muad'Dib? Is it Paul Atreides? It's like, what the fuck did you get that from? And
it's like being racist against Arrakis. Like, I know one guy there, so it must be him.
Yeah, and I know, obviously, she talks about the Bene Gesserit's religious patterns, and of course, Paul Atreides is the son of a Bene Gesserit. But yeah, it's kind of crazy to be like, oh wow, yeah, Muad'Dib, but that's Paul Atreides, even though they were all supposedly killed. I just find again this whole, the Emperor and particularly the Emperor, but also Princess Irulan. Why do they dislike House Atreides? Why did this thing start? What's in it for them? What's in it for them backing the Harkonnens? But yeah, that's not really explained at all, and I was kind of disappointed in that.
Yeah, I think like that's the thing, because the first movie, I mean, I kind of mentioned the idea of it being about setup, which you could say is maybe a bit of a simplistic thing, but yeah, I think like, well, the second half of the first movie is all about setup. So for me, like that's kind of the additional level of like this movie. I feel like it had a lot to deliver on in terms of explaining things, because a lot was left unexplained by the first movie. So it will be really interesting if like Messiah just like for all we know, Messiah might explain loads of this stuff, but
yeah,
maybe it's just going to be a whole trilogy where the whole time you're just like, oh, maybe the next movie's really going to like explain everything.
Yeah, you're right. The setup was good, but the payoff was not, basically. Yeah. Anyway.
Yes. Anyway, so on Arrakis, Stilgar's Fremen accompany Paul Atreides and his pregnant mother, Lady Jessica, to Sietch Tabr.
Sietch Tabr, yeah.
Sietch Tabr.
Yeah. So the Harkonnens, of course, are searching for them. And the opening scene is so good. Again, one of those scenes where you see it in the cinema, and when the music kicks in and the Harkonnens start to fly upwards, it's great. I was like, oh yeah, because I knew people liked this movie before I went to see it, but when that starts, you're like, oh yeah, this is going to be good. It's going to be one of those movies where it's really good, and yeah, I love that. And the first scene was quite good as well. And again, it shows Paul's ascent from where he is to where he gets to at the end of the movie from just a power perspective. That's good. But yeah, I don't know if you enjoyed that opening scene as much as I did.
Like they kind of like they ambush them.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, that's fantastic. Yes, so I did like that scene. I thought it did a good job at showing like insurgency in Iraq. I enjoyed the insurgency that was going on in Iraq. I mean, yeah, I think you pretty much covered it. It does a good job at, and also like the technology thing. Like I do like, and like the way they like suck the moisture out of people. I know in the first one they had the whole thing about like if you spit, like that's like a sign of respect because you're giving up your moisture. Like that's the kind of like clever world building. You can tell like this Frank Herbert guy was a real artist with the stuff he thought about.
Well, yeah, and also Denis Villeneuve cares about that stuff.
Yes,
like he is very insistent on making sure the world building is good. Which is, one of his, better points. What happens next?
Some Fremen suspect the Atreides are spies, while Stilgar sees signs of the prophecy that a mother and son from the outer world will bring prosperity to Arrakis. Yeah, so Stilgar's a really hardcore believer, which is convenient.
Yeah, well, I'd say it's convenient, but, that is what the Bene Gesserit have tried to foster. People like him. So, it is what it is. And we'll get into the Bene Gesserit later. But yeah, I think Paul's motivation is explained in such a clunky way here. Because Villeneuve, again, one of the issues with him, he doesn't care about dialogue. And it shows. Because I think he had a quote after Dune Part 2 came out where he said, wish movies didn't have as much dialogue. And, focus more on the spectacle. And I disagree with him on that. There was a good video that I saw recently, a video essay talking about how Villeneuve's theories, I guess, are misplaced and movies could actually do with better dialogue.
He's a hack.
Dialogue is so important, and I think that is what is lacking in this movie. He just often shows you stuff, and it's pretty cool. But for instance, and when he tries to do dialogue doesn't happen that much, but when he tries to do it, it also sounds unnatural. Like Paul starts talking about Bene Gesserit propaganda, which sounds so unnatural, and there's a few lines in this movie which just sounds so unnatural, and you can tell were lifted from the book because the dialogue is often quite casual, and then Paul starts talking about Bene Gesserit propaganda, or the anthropologists told him to walk like this, there's one point when Zendaya is with Chani, as she's known, is with Paul, and Chani says like, oh yeah, your mother is fanning the flames of your legend, and it's like they talk so casually to each other, and then they wouldn't say something like that,
Yeah.
And so I found, his dialogue there needs to be more of it, but when he tries to do it, sometimes it is quite unnatural. And that'd be fine actually if they talked like that throughout the whole movie, but they don't. A lot of conversations are quite casual, and the dialogue is quite simple. And then you can tell, well, that's out of nowhere. That's that. And I haven't read the book, but I assume that would be a line that would be lifted from the book. That's my criticism regarding the dialogue. I don't know if you agree on that.
Yes, yeah. I don't know if I actually noticed it being as jarring. Which but like now you're saying it, I'm like, yeah, I can see that of like characters. I think like part of it is obviously there's a sense in which you're used to in sci-fi characters often talking kind of weird ways, but they don't. Definitely right. A lot of the time people do talk normally, and then suddenly they'll just be like, talking about very directly talking about what's going on in this kind of unnatural way.
Yeah, I think particularly Chani and Paul talk casual, like Stilgar, and when they talk in the Fremen language, I think it is more like flowery, the language. But when they're talking in English, it's kind of on the low. It's low key. It's not like Shakespearean dialogue, apart from like in a few specific points. And yeah, it just stands out. But I wouldn't say it's Shakespearean. It's just complicated. I'm like, well, given what's happened before, it doesn't make sense. But I would say also another criticism of the dialogue is sometimes, well, in this instance as well, right at the start of the movie, it is very expository as well. I just don't think he's very good at dialogue at all, Villeneuve, and it shows because Paul starts talking about Bene Gesserit propaganda, and he just says, I must sway the non-believers. If they follow me, we can disrupt spice production. That's the only way I can get to the Emperor. It's just, again, so expository. He just says that, and it's like, I'd like if that was explained, but just not in a literal way. And it's clear Denis Villeneuve, he doesn't care.
Yeah, it's almost like an anime dialogue where characters just like explain exactly what's going on in their head. Again, not to constantly reference the first film, just because I decided to rewatch it, but like I was actually surprised rewatching that film at how much like at the beginning they just rely on characters being like, oh, we're heading to Fremen territory, we've got to make sure these people, they use all these special ways of the desert and they really understand it. Anyway.
Yeah, I will say just on the dialogue, again, there's 3 issues then. I don't think there's enough dialogue, honestly, but when Villeneuve does try the dialogue, sometimes it sounds unnatural, and sometimes, again, in this instance, it's too expository. Like, again, he doesn't care, and honestly, it shows. Yeah. And at the start, again, explaining Paul's motivations, he his plan basically is, okay, how to get the non-believers on my side. I'll become a Fremen. But he doesn't ever say that plan. It just like kind of happens. Yes. So again, it's I don't need him to say it, but again, it's an insight into his character. If he had a conversation with his mother about it, but yeah, he doesn't. So.
Yeah. Actually, I had one probing question for you. This movie picks up exactly where the last movie left off, which makes sense because it's like part 2. But I was thinking like they do spend a lot of time showing Paul becoming accepted, which I guess actually this is the next point. So maybe I'll get through the next point and then kind of make this. So the Fremen accept Paul, but Stilgar tells Jessica she must succeed the Reverend Mother by drinking the water of life. She uses her Bene Gesserit training to transmute the liquid and survive. Chani correctly believes the prophecy was fabricated to manipulate the Fremen, but Chani begins to respect Paul after he says he only seeks to fight with the Fremen, not to rule them. Okay, so that kind of like covers what I was getting. So like the way that he kind of, obviously Chani like accepts, the way he kind of becomes ingratiated into the Fremen is actually one of the aspects of the film that I think is covered quite well, whereas obviously I say there's other developments in the plot which feel a bit more rushed. But having said that, considering I feel like you've got so much ground to cover, I almost feel like if I was making this film, I'd be like, I really want to kind of start this film with he's already kind of established himself in the Fremen, and then that way you can spend more time on the other stuff.
No, I think this is fine. I'm not going to critique it from that. What I will critique is how. So he's trying to ingratiate himself with the Fremen, and what he's doing is smart because he's convincing the non-believers because he's like, hey, I don't want to rule you. I just want to be part of you. And maybe, but that's the thing. I don't know if he's eventually thinking, well, if I'm part of them eventually, one day I'll get to rule them. And I don't know how smart he is. I don't know how much he's thinking about these things because he said, I need to convince the non-believers. So I would assume what he's doing is really smart here, and he's trying to almost trick them. But then I'm frustrated about the Bene Gesserit law too, because they're trained and they create these prophecies, and they are so important. Of course, they're important to the whole fucking movie. But you don't really get a good sense of what's going on. You just hear about it every now and again. And you really need to. The Bene Gesserit are so important, and the movie acknowledges their importance, and yet they don't really feel like the movie treats them as importantly as they should, or the law that goes into the law behind the Bene Gesserit, if you get what I'm saying. Yeah,
no, absolutely, I would agree. Like this movie, I think so. The first one, I mean, it's one complete movie, so I figure myself comes. Like I remember thinking, oh, this is kind of like Game of Thrones, this aspect of you've kind of got. They're like feudal lords, and the emperor's a bit like the king, and they're all trying to outmaneuver each other. And whatever else you can say about Game of Thrones, it really does establish like, oh, here are the Lannisters, here's like their deal, here's the different family members, here's their kind of priorities and their goals. And obviously, I mean, of course, you can do that because it's a TV show. But yeah, there's like a lot in this film where it's kind of like, the motivations of this group of people would be important to know. Or like if it were going to be a mystery, it should be kind of a mystery in a more satisfying way, I feel. Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, it's just frustrating, but yeah, we'll move on.
So, the Water of Life prematurely awakens the mind of Jessica's unborn daughter, Alia, allowing Jessica to communicate with her. They agree to focus on convincing the more skeptical Northern Fremen of the prophecy. This is like fun because one thing Fremen. Yeah, it's funny because I feel like it's obviously supposed to be like free men, because they are like free men resisting the
But it's not.
occupation. But yeah. Anyway, yeah. The thing I've heard about Dune, and I think this is more true of the later stories, is that they get really weird, like
Yeah.
very strange. And like this is kind of the only strange thing that is in this film. That
Well-
this woman's like telepathically talking to her unborn daughter.
In the original novel, and this is shown in the 1984 version of Dune, she actually has the kid, and the kid actually talks to her.
Cool.
So yeah, like you have a little like 5-year-old talking to Lady Jessica and Paul as well, I assume. So yeah, it's kind of more normal here because you know, I think it's easier to be like, oh yeah, like my fetus is talking to me, even though it sounds weirder, you know. But you know, you don't actually have the character. You know, all the dialogue from the girl is coming through. You know, what she called Rebecca Ferguson. So that makes it more normal. So that's, I think, a good choice from Denis Villeneuve. But yeah, just so much stuff is thrown at you in this part. You know, the fetus can now talk to Jessica, and is telling Paul via Jessica that Paul must drink the water of life, and what the strategy should be from Paul's perspective. And you know, Paul just doesn't react to this at all. You know, like, again, he wants revenge, wants to lead the Fremen, you know, and this crazy shit is happening to him, but he's just fine with it. You know, he just
like,
rolls.
okay, cool.
Yeah, like when Jessica says to Paul, he's like, she speaks to me, I can hear her. He's just like, Timothée Chalamet just has a blank expression on his face. Like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's a problem I had in the first movie. Again, like, you get more insight into his character, but like, again, you know, he just doesn't react to normal. It's the stuff you would expect. I know he's like the son of a Bene Gesserit, and he's meant to be this, you know, crazy, powerful guy, you know, eventually. But you know, if this fetus was talking to you, I think you'd say something. I don't know, or talking to your mother, you know, you'd say you'd react a bit more than he does.
Yeah, it would be useful to know like exactly how much of like the weird stuff in this film is like because obviously this is clearly like people have the voice thing where they can just command people to do things and they do it. It would be nice to know for context. Like maybe it's just like, oh yeah, you've got one of those magical talking fetus babies. That was Donald Trump executive order for the pro-life lobby, Project 2025. We've had magical talking fetus babies for a while now.
Yes.
Sorry, just getting political there, Luke. You know.
Yeah.
I thought everyone would appreciate that.
That's great.
Yeah. So. Paul and Chani fall in love as Paul immerses himself in Fremen culture, learning their language, riding a sandworm, and raiding Harkonnen spice operations. Paul adopts the Fremen name Usul and Muad'Dib. So yeah, I do like some of this. I did think like it seems to me a little bit like the whole. There was a bit of someone's like, oh, you've got to learn to ride the sandworm, and I feel like it wasn't that long after that until he was riding the sandworm. Like,
it's fine.
Yeah,
You know?
I don't hate it, but I noticed it.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. Like, he's immersing himself in the culture, so this is just one part of it, you know. And yeah, I think I love these scenes. Like, the spectacle is incredible. This is, of course, what Villeneuve focused on, and it pays off. So yeah, I love when he's riding the sandworm. You know, it's a great scene, and I think that's one of those scenes where you're watching it in the cinema and you're like, oh yeah, this is cooking. But yeah, I also want to again criticize the movie. It feels like I'm doing the same thing, like critiquing.
Again, we will reiterate. It's very easy when you're talking about what happens in the movie to make it sound bad because you can't repeatedly say, but the movie visually is very impressive. Yeah,
we're praising the visuals, but then critiquing.
Yeah, Luke, you've got to pick a good thumbnl for this one so everyone knows that the movie looks good.
Yes, critiquing the character the characterization of Paul, I guess, because we know what Paul's goal is, right? Because he wants revenge. So again, I'm just wondering constantly, where is he on the scale in terms of manipulating the Fremen and genuinely enjoying being one? Because at one stage of the movie, he takes off like his father's ring, you know, and puts it away, and that would indicate, okay, so he is one of the Fremen now. I don't know, like, you don't get a real sense that he has changed his like character. You know, again, this is where he could use a scene with his mother, again, the only person he can talk honestly to, where he talks about, you know, in like how he feels like he's becoming one of the Fremen now, because, you know, he's just doing stuff that if you were trying to manipulate the Fremen, you would do. You know, like ride the sandworm and adopt the name Usul. And again, I like when he, again, the name that he gives himself, Muad'Dib, which means,
is the little mouse.
Yeah, the desert mouse. Just a humble fighter. You know, I don't want to lead you. I'm just a desert mouse. And
he doesn't want to be the Pope.
Again, yeah, it's perfect. And it also means, you know, of course, the one who points the way. But he doesn't say that, but maybe he knows that. But again, I don't know how smart he is, because I don't know how much he's trying to manipulate the Fremen. Because, again, the movie doesn't make that clear. So I don't know how clever Paul is, because the movie doesn't really get into how much is he manipulating, the Fremen. And yeah, so I'm just quite frustrated with this. Again, that's why you need to have some scenes where he talks to Lady Jessica, because again, she's the only one he can talk to honestly. But that does not happen, unfortunately. And it's frustrating not to, because I guess in the book, you can really go into Paul's thoughts and feelings, and you really can get into the character. But here, Villeneuve just shows you what happens, and I'm really kind of frustrated by this. And I think it would have been better if, again, there was more of a focus on Paul and where he's at in terms of, how far is he turning native, I guess is the phrase. But
you can't really see into his head, and I also for me, I found the character of Chani very weird in that, I don't know, maybe this is the thing that comes up more relevant later, but it's the fact that she's the only person who's against Paul being the Messiah when he decides to, and it's I guess it's just because she knows him, but I didn't feel I don't know, in my head the seed wasn't really laid super well for why she in particular is so. If anything, you'd think because they're in love, she should be the one person who's gunning for him. And frankly, I don't blame him for going for that other girl instead.
That's what happens in the book, but Denis Villeneuve changed it. But we'll get to that later.
Okay, so Jessica travels south, but Paul remains in the north, fearful that his visions of an apocalyptic holy war will come to pass if he goes south as a messiah riding a donkey. The thing about this is, this is important because it establishes that even though Paul does want revenge, and the Harkonnens did kill his whole family, he's so resistant to the idea of being the Messiah who starts this holy war, that he's willing to give up all his revenge and just live this humble life because the idea of being a Messiah and starting this holy war is so horrible to him. So, this is the kind of thing which makes me think if he's going to suddenly change by the end of the film and be let's do a holy war, this film is going to have to really delve into his characterization to establish why he changes his mind.
Yes.
That's just all I'll say.
Yes, and indeed, to have this opinion in the first place, because he has this dream where he's, obviously people are dead, and Chani says, oh, it's because of the spice. But again, he just wakes up from this nightmare, and it didn't appear that scene had this big an effect on him. At the time, because again, this Paul Atreides, he has to be so low key. He can't react to anything until randomly he just shouts at his mother. At one point, I'm like, yeah, that's a bit out of whack considering what kind of guy he is. But apparently it did have a big effect on him because he doesn't want to go south because he doesn't want to start this holy war. But at the time, it's just it's just a bad nightmare. No, but apparently it really affected him. And again, the characterization is it's not good. You need to show how big an effect it had on him, and then of course we'll get to him doing the 180 later, which is a whole other issue. But again, the argument he has with his mother, I'm just so frustrated because we get the tip of the iceberg in terms of what the Bene Gesserit have done to the Fremen, the whole backstory, this whole prophecy thing. It's so important, and it's just kind of it's the reason why this whole fucking movie is happening. What has she done? What have the Bene Gesserit done? Fucking tell me, because it's so important, and you keep on acknowledging it and bringing it up, but I don't know. Of course, maybe the books explain it, but I'm not reading that shit.
Yes. Yeah. No, yeah, I absolutely, I would agree with you. Anyway, so Baron Vladimir Harkonnen installs his nephew, Thade Routher. They said his name. I can't remember how it said there.
It's like Ratha.
Thade Rather, as Arrakis's ruler. Lady Margot Fenring, a Bene Gesserit, is sent to evaluate Thade Rather and secure his genetic lineage. So yeah, this is kind of the thing I already mentioned about how this is the only situation where the Bene Gesserit are hey, we're doing things sneaky behind the scenes, but literally the one thing they do, it's not, well, I mean, this thing would be worthwhile if Thade played a massive role in some big political maneuverings, but he doesn't really. The one thing I will say, just to say a positive, is hey, good job making the Harkonnen place look really striking and crazy and mental. Again,
the scene on the Harkonnen homeworld is amazing, and again, it's great to see in the cinema. I keep saying that, it's one of the standouts. But yeah, Austin Butler as well, so good in the role. He changed his accent so it sounded like Stellan.
Would you say that he's almost as white as this as he was in Elvis?
Yes, indeed. But yeah,
and he tends to be Harkonnen. He's going, he's white.
Yeah,
he's white.
Yeah, but as I was saying, he changed his accent so he could sound like Stellan Skarsgård. So that's why he sounded like that, which is great. Again, he's such a good actor. And I just.
Would you say he's a generational talent?
Potentially, he's going to star in American Psycho. I don't know if you know that, but he is.
I did hear. Okay, I didn't know he was starring in it, but yeah, that's fun. Okay.
Yeah. No, he's going to cook because he's just very good. Although he just is kind of playing psychos a lot recently.
Yeah.
But yeah. Also, like the Bene Gesserit, again, they're involved in everything. We actually see them do the kind of shit that they do. But yeah, again, I'm just frustrated about how they just appear every now and again. That they are clearly important because there's this idea that they actually run everything. Like the Emperor, attacked Atreides because of the Bene Gesserit, and the movie just openly says this. But then you get like 3 scenes with them. So yeah, it's again at least you get this, but it is again frustrating. It's like, well, these people should play a bigger role in the movie, I think, given how important we know they are.
Yes, absolutely. Anyway, so Paul reunites with Gurney Halleck, who leads Paul to the hidden atomic warhead stockpile of House Atreides. Yeah, so, I mean, I already said, like, to me, like, the idea that there's, like... I guess it's just because, like, nukes... Like, obviously, from my perspective, it seems like a really powerful thing. I can appreciate it in this universe. But, like, the idea of, like, you're watching a movie about a war, and then someone's like, oh, we actually do have, like, a bunch of nukes just around. Like, to me, like, that almost sounds, like, comedically... like, oh, well, that's really useful. But yeah, I can appreciate that it makes sense.
Yeah, but he's not part of the Fremen, though, is he?
Yeah. So he's a, what do they call it? A wild card.
Yeah, so this guy comes in as like, hell, we have nukes because I'm part of House Atreides. Yeah, there's nothing that I find comedic about it, to be honest with you.
I guess my only beef is that I feel like a lot of this movie is just Paul discovering stuff that is kind of like it's already in place, and that's not necessarily terrible. Like you can have like, I mean, like from an unconventional narrative perspective, it's okay to have like a character who's kind of just tossed to and fro. But like obviously the Bene Gesserit have already set up all this stuff about the Messiah. His father put all of these nukes in place. The Fremen have this massive population that, obviously lots of, like, apparently the Harkonnen only thought it was like, well, they thought it was much less. So there is lots of stuff that's kind of like set in place that he just like, oh, cool, yeah.
Well,
nice.
that's why his characterization is so important.
Yeah.
And it kind of fails. I wouldn't say it fails, but it's just not as good as I would like it to be for a movie which in other aspects is really good. And is of course nominated for Best Picture. But yeah, I will say again, Gurney is introduced and of course reminds him, you are an Atreides, which I like. Why would he go back on this idea of revenge? Well, it's because Gurney shows up and reminds him, about his heritage, and literally he accesses the atomic stockpile because of his genetic heritage. Like that's symbolic. You can take down the Harkonnens because you are an Atreides and not because you are Fremen, which I like. But yeah.
Yeah, so Fade Rathar unleashes a devastating attack on the Northern Fremen, destroying Sietch Tabr and forcing Paul and the survivors to journey south. I have this is another example. Like God, I'm now it's my turn to complain. No, it's just another example of when some characters just decide to do something and then they do that thing. Because at first I was thinking, oh man, these Harkonnens, and obviously it can come down to the fact of you could say Fade's a better manager than Dave Bautista. I can't remember the character's name. Raban? Is that the character's name? Yes. But it's just kind of funny to me that I guess Raban was really incompetent if he didn't think, hey, let's just go use the weapons that we have to just destroy them, because apparently we can just do that.
Yeah, I know. I find that really weird. I'm sure it's explained. I'm sure it's not as simple as I'm thinking, but okay, so the plan is just to bomb.
Yeah.
Why weren't you doing that before?
I like to imagine the USA is looking at us oh god, we didn't think about that with the Taliban. We thought these their kind of hit and run insurgency situation was just there was nothing we could do, but we could have just used our weapons to fire at them.
Well, the question is, how do you know where to bomb? That's the whole thing, and apparently they know where to bomb now. So there you go. I mean, I don't know. Isn't it obvious? Is Raban retarded? Maybe that's the
that's the real lesson here. Yeah. Don't have a retarded guy in charge of your army.
Yeah. And again, Paul goes south because again he needs to drink the water of life and he needs to see everything. Because he talks to Jameis, who of course he killed in the last movie, and is that it? You're wondering what to do, and you don't. Basically, he's in a situation where he's like, I don't know what to do. And so, the message is, okay, well, you need to take the water of life to see everything. But basically going south and taking the water of life is already a choice. You are already going in a direction. I think the comparison is, before you start a hunt, you got to go to the top of the tallest, sand dune, to see everything. But the problem is taking the water of life and going south, that is already going in a particular direction. You've already kind of made your choice.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't feel like this characterization is Like I was gonna say it doesn't seem like he's an actor protagonist. I guess it's not really that yet. It's just the fact that the decisions he makes, it's kind of like the movie's acting as if it's characterizing what he's doing by having him do things, but what's the reason why he did that initial thing in the first place?
Well, he went down south because, to see everything, to take the water of life. But the point I'm making is, well, you've already made a choice in doing that.
Yes.
Yeah. But go on.
In the south, Paul drinks the water of life and falls into a coma. This angers Chani, but she awakens Paul. This is when I start to be like, I don't fully, and this might just be me being kind of stupid. I don't really get Chani. No, to be fair, because the movie doesn't have much dialogue. Obviously I can infer, well, she's just, she just likes to complain. Fair enough.
Well, no, she's just like a normal, believing Fremen.
An atheist.
That's her role. And again, in the book, she is, like the rest of the Fremen, swept, away and believes Paul is the chosen one. But again, in the movie, it's a deliberate choice from Villeneuve to change that, and I do think it kind of makes the character more interesting, which we'll get to. So stop complaining about that.
Yes, I will.
But yeah, again, like Paul. Okay, so you know how Paul drinks the water of life and survives.
Yes.
Right? Even though supposedly, if you're a man and you take the water of life, or you drink it, you die.
He's a woman. It's just like Conclave.
It's just like Conclave. No. Okay. Do you know why he can survive?
No.
Okay, so this was explained kind of in the first movie, and I remembered. Well, you watched it recently.
Watched it recently.
Yeah,
but you watched it 3 years ago.
Well, I did listen to our review of it.
Okay.
But it didn't explain it fully. But from what I can recall, the Bene Gesserit wanted Jessica to have a daughter.
That is, yes, you are right. And they're like, you defied us by having a son, you twat.
And the son is... There's meant to be this thing, every 1,000 years, one of the Bene Gesserit has a son, and the son is powerful and can do Bene Gesserit things, basically.
Yes.
And so...
He can be the Cavadar Haderach.
Yes. Okay. There we go. But, and this guy, Paul, could be the Cavadar Haderach or whatever. But that is why he can, drink the water of life, because he is this guy. But the movie... Well, I put, did you forget that? And, apparently you did, even though you shouldn't have.
Yes, that's me.
Yeah, but again, it's not explained in the movie, and it's pivotal for the movie. The whole reason he can do this is because of this aspect of, being this Bene Gesserit. Well, he has the power of a Bene Gesserit despite being a man. And if you remember the last movie, great, but of course, I imagine quite a few people would not remember what happened in the last movie.
Yes.
And yeah, again, it's just this is just something that happens. And again, the Bene Gesserit and their plans are central to this, and it's just not given enough, there's not enough of an explanation unless Denis Villeneuve could say, well, it was kind of explained in the first 30 minutes of the first movie, so there you go.
Yes. Anyway, so possessing clairvoyance across space and time, Paul learns that Jessica is Baron Harkonnen's daughter, who was assigned as concubine to Duke Leto by the Bene Gesserit to unite House Harkonnen and House Atreides in furtherance of their plan to produce the... Kwisatz Haderach.
Well done.
The Benedict Cumberbatch. So this is fine. This, again, you could, this is the kind of stuff that, kind of feudalistic politics or imperial politics that can actually be interesting, but obviously, I suppose, having, clairvoyance, to use that fancy term, it's a fine way to do exposition, I suppose.
Yeah, but, right, okay, is it explained in the movie that the Bene Gesserit have to unite House Harkonnen, or trying to unite House Harkonnen and Atreides to produce this quasi-Haderach? Is that explained in the movie?
I would know. Now, you've got to bear in mind, occasionally I have been known to not remember every single detail of the movie, but I don't believe it is.
Because maybe it was in part one, again, I haven't rewatched it, but I have not... I do not recall this being explained, and it's there in Wikipedia, and I'm like, okay, but that's quite a bit of lore, and very important lore.
Put need citation next to it.
Yes, but I'm like, well, is there an actual, is there an actual line in the movie which goes into this? I don't think so. And again, it's a massive deal. The Bene Gesserit, again, are so important, but they just don't get that much attention when they should. Also, the Harkonnen reveal is quite undramatic. He just says, well, Harkonnens,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of also at the same time, does that even, not to jump to the end, but I don't even know if that has a massive impact on the story.
Well, potentially, which
I might in the future, yes.
Even in the next part, which I'll get into, but also I just think it's kind of convenient that Paul can do all this, and be the chosen one again. But what the princess said before, Florence Pugh, that the Bene Gesserit has religious patterns, so I guess this is a pattern, that he would be able to get rid of this poison to become the chosen one. And this lines up exactly with the Fremen prophecy, but again, apparently the Bene Gesserit just control everything. So that's the real message. It's like, seems a bit convenient. Well, no, it's just the Bene Gesserit. They just control everything. Again, they're so powerful, and this movie really, it shows that without, again, putting them as important as I believe they should be. It doesn't acknowledge that. But anyway, let's go on.
So Paul meets with the Fremen War Council, galvanizing the crowd by demonstrating his ability to discern their deepest thoughts. He declares himself the Lisan al-Gaib. So, basically, this is like where he does very much what they call in the business a 180 in darts.
180. A massive change in his character because he didn't want to go south because he didn't want to start a holy war, but he has now drunk the water of life. Again, you've kind of already gone down that path, but whatever. And now you want to start a holy war. Why? Why have you now changed so quickly? It's a massive deal again because we talked about how because of the Bene Gesserit, basically his path has been. And the prophecy and everything, his path has been created for him, and he's just kind of going down it. So, there's not much tension there, perhaps. So the tension really has to be in his characterization, in his character arc. It's really about him, and it's just very unsatisfying when he just changes. And you could say, well, maybe it's because he has, a different perspective on things, because now he sees everything. So now he doesn't see the value in life. Now he's fine with billions of people dying in a holy war. But again, that's not explained. And again, it's just such a radical change. And he seems to be, again, if he changed and he was explaining it and he was trying to cope with the change himself or his change in perspective, then okay. But he's just like a completely different person, and that again is just very, very unsatisfying. It's a nice direction for the movie to take. Like this hero becomes an anti-hero. But you gotta do a better job than this. And again, there's maybe reasons behind it, but it's not explained in the movie. So yeah, I'm just very frustrated by this.
Yeah. I mean, I've kind of been I've already preemptively complained a lot about this specific aspect.
Yes.
And it's kind of crazy because you're like this movie, this 2-part movie is over 5 hours, and there are definitely movies, like single movies that are a normal length, that do a better job establishing a radical character change than this. So it's not great.
It is not great. No.
Yes. So Paul sends a challenge to Saddam Hussein. No, not really. Shaddam, who arrives on Arrakis. As Shaddam, it is really weird to me, the way, why does everything sound like it's all about the Iraq War? As Saddam chastises the Harkonnens for their failures, the Fremen launch an offensive using atomics and sandworms to win. Paul executes the Baron and captures Shaddam. Yes, this is the big ending.
Yeah, the sandworms, can I say, the sandworms are great. I've talked about the visuals a lot. The best part in the movie was sitting back and watching the sandworms in 70mm IMAX come through the dust, and you're just like, wow, this is cinema. It literally
Do you feel
is.
like it would have been better if it was 3D? Yeah. They should bring back 3D.
I had such a big smile on my face watching that. And again, we've kind of critiqued this movie a lot, but again, the experience of watching it in that setting, it was worth it basically. But
yeah. I did remember another, this could have been a nitpick. The fact that but you can. So basically, I just thought it was funny that these really good soldiers on the Imperial side don't try and form formations at all, which you think would be a good thing. But anyway.
Yeah. Oh no, I just want to say a couple more things. Firstly,
that's fine.
I assume that the Emperor, went to Arrakis because he didn't want the houses finding out and hoped he could strike a deal with Paul potentially. Maybe that's why. Because if I would not do that if I was the Emperor, unless of course you're like, oh shit, I guess I have to. So maybe that's
your hand's been forced.
Yes. Also, okay, so the whole plan works perfectly because it's kind of clear by now that Paul can see the future. Because he has a premonition, of course, of him stabbing Feyd-Rautha. I don't know if you caught that.
Yes, I did.
Yes. So it's clear he can see the future and he predicts the Sandstorm. And you know how Stilgar throughout the movie has been going, he can foresee everything. Yeah. And it's all been bullshit. That's kind of the joke. And when he goes, the Mahdi is too humble to admit he is the Mahdi, that's
yeah.
funny.
I thought that was actually a good funny line.
Yeah. Again, it just highlights the ridiculousness of the whole prophecy. But the thing is, right now he actually is this all-seeing God because he times the sandstorm and basically plans everything out with the worms, and of course he actually sees exactly what happens at the end of the movie, and it's exactly as he foresaw. But I do want to say, I was hoping up until this point the movie was implying that Paul got to the stage kind of by luck, because I'm thinking about when he has to tame the desert. Do you remember that?
The desert worm, yes.
No, when he has to tame the desert.
Oh, yes. Like, and he like does the walk across. With,
yes.
Like, yeah.
Well, yeah. They all say, well, he's going to die, and maybe he would, but Charney saves him.
Yes.
And he, again, in terms of luck, he almost falls off the sandworm, and he just gets on it. And there's a lot of these moments where he could die. I think his mother saves him, from getting shot right at the beginning of the movie. He does a bunch of things where it's like, oh, he, if things went slightly differently, if Charney didn't help him, maybe he would die, etc. And so, if the movie is trying to imply that, like, he got to this stage by luck, again, to highlight the ridiculousness of the prophecy, then that would be good. Yeah, I'm hoping that the movie was kind of suggesting that, but I'm not really sure it was. So I'm
like he's kind of like a fraud, basically. Like, that's the thing. It would be more interesting if if it was a subversion.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the thing. The message would be the whole prophecy is just kind of bullshit. But and even when he drinks the water of life, it has been arranged. It's artificial because he could survive that because he is the son of this Bene Gesserit. So it is still artificial in this regard, but at least he has these like superpowers now where he can see into the future, apparently. But beforehand, it was just luck and, again, highlighting the fallacy of the prophecy, which is, again, a theme from Dune, I guess, the actual novel, which, again, I don't think Villeneuve goes into that much at all, to be honest. Again, things just kind of happen. And again, maybe I'm reading too much into the movie, hoping too much that, it implies through, if you really look into it, that, oh, he just got to the stage because of luck. And therefore that would go into the whole theme of the prophecy is bullshit. There is no real chosen one unless you really want to believe it, despite just you can only get to the stage by luck. But whatever. I don't know how seriously Villeneuve took that theme. It just seems maybe the cynical reading of it is things just happen, and he's just interested in the spectacle and not interested in the themes that Frank Herbert was trying to espouse in his novel. But sorry, go on.
No, well, yeah. I mean, I would agree that would be. Like an interest, like this film, it feels like it's yearning for some kind of twist, because like you love a good twist, like something like, oh wow, that's crazy, and like a twist that's kind of well set up, and it doesn't really have that so far. Again, maybe there'll be something interesting in Messiah, but yeah, for me, I mean, like this kind of final big fight, it's reasonably entertaining, but yeah, I think it would be way more entertaining, obviously, seeing it in the proper cinema in your fancy pantsy 70mm IMAX.
Yes.
Anyway, the Great Houses arrive orbiting Arrakis, but Paul threatens to destroy the spice fields with atomic weapons if they intervene. This is just like when Saddam Hussein burned all the oil fields in Kuwait.
Yeah, so the Reverend Mother calls Paul an abomination, and it's clear that Lady Jessica betrayed them. Well, again, she betrayed them because, Duke Leto Atreides was killed. But again, why did she want to have this kid who was a man? Or a kid who eventually became a man, obviously. Like, why? Because, again, I think that's why the fucking Bene Gesserit says abomination, because it's like, a man shouldn't be talking like this. How can this man have this Bene Gesserit power? Because, he consumed the water of life, so, and all that shit. So how can this be?
Yes, so Paul challenges Shaddam and, to Chani's dismay, demands to marry Irulan. Fade Rathar volunteers to be Shaddam's champion, and Paul kills him in a duel. Irulan agrees to marry Paul. Yeah, so really wraps things up, throws a lot of wrenches in the works at the last minute there. Did you like the fight? The fight was reasonably entertaining.
I don't think that's a phrase.
Okay, yeah, never mind then.
No, it's a great duel. It's fun. But again, the tension's kind of taken out of it because you already know he's going to win.
Yeah. Oh, also, I suppose I should say this is like the reveal on like the fact that Fade was like the Bene Gesserit. Oh, like we're gonna have this Fade guy do something. That seems kind of pointless because he doesn't really do very much. I mean,
well, yeah. I mean, they're trying to create ways to get back at Paul Atreides. Like, oh, he's powerful. Okay, we'll get Fade Ratha on our side, and we'll have And so if he won that duel, it'd be like, okay, he's in our corner, so that's good for us. But of course he doesn't.
Yes,
that's one of the messages of what happens in this movie. The Bene Gesserit are beaten, but even when they're beaten, Princess Irulan still marries Paul Atreides, So of course she's a Bene Gesserit, so even when they lose, they still have this backup plan to win. So that's the thing. Honestly, like again, I'm talking a lot about the Bene Gesserit are the real like enemies, or the real antagonists, I should say, to Paul and everything. Like they're so powerful, but you don't really think about it until you actually do sit down and think about it.
Yeah. Do you think they like control like the banking and like
Yes.
the media? Okay, that
Yes.
sounds like they're like really powerful, and Paul should do something about them.
Yes.
The Great Houses reject Paul's ascendancy, so he orders the Fremen to attack the orbiting fleet. As Stilgar leads the Fremen, Jessica and Alia reflect on the beginning of Paul's holy war. Chani refuses to bow to Paul and departs alone on a sandworm. Villeneuve modified Chani's characterization to be a non-believer, as he felt that she eventually disappeared in Paul's shadow in the book. Okay, so it sounds pretty woke to me. So you decided that this woman of color needs to have, not disappear into this white man's shadow.
She's an independent woman who don't need no Lisa and Gaib. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it's a good change compared to the book because, it makes her character more interesting. And it's a good setup, honestly, for Dune Messiah. What's going to happen with Chani.
Which is good. We stand a director who adapts.
Who empowers women.
Yes, that too, yes.
Yeah, all right. Let's conclude. You go first.
Yeah, so honestly, like the amount we said, like someone... You could almost make an argument for this movie being like actively bad because like there are like if the film really should be about this character of Paul and his change, his kind of like a Michael Corleoneification, if you will, then you'd want to see that kind of evolve. So I think we've pretty much said everything needs to be said about the plot. The real question is, what is the saving grace of this film? Well, it's the production, it's the visuals, and you'll probably rate it higher than me because you really experienced that. For me, this is actually a low 6, which is a pretty low rating, but with the criticisms we've had of the plot and the fact I didn't, I haven't experienced the visuals in the same way you have. I think that's a fair rating from me because and I compare this to other kind of great fantasy media. I think those stories are much better constructed, like the story of Luke Skywalker, of Aragorn, of even Harry Potter. I think are like better structured than this story so far. Yeah,
because again, Villeneuve I don't think was really interested in that, unfortunately, and I think it makes the movie worse. But clearly he's putting all his eggs in one basket. And again, I remember someone saying at the time, when they just had watched Dune, it was like one of the greatest cinematic experiences they'd had. And I agree, honestly. It was like coming out of that cinema. It was like, wow, that was intense, that was incredible. And I remember thinking at the time it was like an 8.5 or a 9 out of 10, and. Rewatching it back, I'm like, I gave the first one a 6.5. This one I think is slightly better. So I'm gonna go in between, taking what I experienced in the cinema and what I experienced here, because I've criticized it a lot, and you kind of have to when you're just talking about what happens in the movie. But yeah, it's an 8 out of 10. I'm gonna give it. Sorry, what did you give it?
Oh, I gave it a low 6.
Okay, wow. So you're I guess my. When I was in the watching it in the cinema, it really did influence me quite a bit, as it should, because it's it's not an illegitimate way to watch it or anything, and this movie was definitely made for that setting. But I'll give it an 8 anyway. What are we talking about next, Mike?
Yeah, so next we're talking about Conclave. As we already said, it's a movie about religion, so it's different. I mean, well, I suppose what I should say is, Luke, why don't you tell us a thing or two about Conclave?
Yeah, so Conclave is a 2024 political thriller directed by Edward Berger. And it's actually based on the 2016 novel by Robert Harris.
Yes.
So, yes. It was the screenplay is by Peter Stratton. It stars Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, Sergio Castellietto, Isabel Rossellini, and Merab Ninsk. Don't know if I said that name right. I'm sorry if I didn't. Anyway, it was released on the 24th of October in the United States. And Michael, can you tell me what the budget was for Conclave?
Yes, I can. The budget was 40 million.
What?
So I'm basing that on the cost of the actors being quite big actors, but the fact that the film was very small.
Was it big actors?
Fuck it. All right,
who's
fine.
big in this movie? Go on, tell me.
I don't know, Stanley Tucci.
Oh yeah, Stanley
John
Tucci.
Lithgow of Daddy's Home 2 fame. Fine, I don't know. So what's how much does it cost to get some, let's say, B-list actors in a movie that's just about some people who are locked up in a building?
Probably won't be 40, right?
Yeah. But I mean, it just seems it's still a movie. It probably costs
some amount of money. It is still a movie.
I mean, I'm going to say 15 million.
Okay, 20.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, you're in the right ballpark there. What about the box office?
Okay, now I don't know. I didn't really hear much about this movie, but 30 million.
You don't hear about any movies, do you?
No, I'm just going to assume it made its money back.
82.4.
Oh, wow. Okay, well done, that movie.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, a movie which got a lot of good reviews. So that may explain it, and that leads us into whether we like the movie. So did you?
Again, so on balance, I technically did like this movie. I do have two reasonable criticisms, one of which is I feel like, and I don't know whether or not this is accurate to what it's actually like in these Catholic conclaves, but I felt like a lot of the characters are very like direct in terms of their opinions. Like the conservatives, like, we're conservatives, we're really conservative, and then the liberals, like, we're liberals, and like he literally says everything that the conservatives are against, I'm for. And like to me that just seemed a little bit like on the nose.
Yeah, I mean, I think the characters maybe could be more subtle. Yeah. Sure.
And the other thing is, so I think this movie relies a lot on like mystery and intrigue and reveals. I think the issue is like once all that stuff is revealed and you're just watching it being like, oh, I know what happens. I don't think it's got quite as much going for it. The one thing I will say is that, so I suppose what I say is I'm disappointed by this movie. So I like this movie, but I'm disappointed by it because this idea of like Catholicism and like religion and these competing ideas, and they're locked together, they're sequestered in this place. You'd think this could be like an opportunity for really kind of deep, thematic, emotional drama. And it was a little bit more surface level than I was hoping. And yeah, like the reliance on like just twists and intrigue to generate the excitement.
I also think the scandals are quite, I don't know what word to say.
There weren't enough paedophiles.
Yes, correct. There needed to be more pedophilia. Why wasn't that a scandal? But no, obviously, what I think I'm trying to say is I think there should be. The scandals are quite obvious. Like, oh, you paid someone for votes. It's like, well, obviously that's a scandal. And that would be quite a massive scandal, and I'm not sure that would happen because, I'm thinking of the scandals, being like what happens to the African guy, more like that, like, oh, he had, an illegitimate kid,
30 years ago. And I was like, actually, like the one line of dialogue I liked is when obviously the guy was like, he was doing this whole forgiveness thing. He was like, we should have a pope who sins and asks for forgiveness. And then the African guy like turns it back on him. He's like, hey, well, I sinned and now I'm asking for forgiveness. Get dunked on with your forgiveness nonsense.
Yeah. But again, that's kind of a big deal as well if the pope had an illegitimate kid. But it's more, it is more subtle than this guy paid money to get votes. But yeah, because that's just blatant corruption. Well, I don't know what the rules are in the church specifically, but it is certainly a scandal. But yeah, so
not in the US electoral system, it's not though.
No, that's right. Yeah, but overall, I think that Ralph Fiennes really does a good job, and yeah, there are some mysteries, and it's intriguing, and it has a good message at the end. But yeah, it is quite surface level. It's not that deep, honestly. Yes. And yeah, I think that people like this because I saw some people say like it's a grown-up movie. Or so one of the critics on Wikipedia, or in that section on Wikipedia, said that. And this is it. Conclave is a godsend for audiences who crave intelligent entertainment.
Yeah.
It's not that intelligent, Yeah. Maybe because Ralph Fiennes speaks in a very I'm doing the opposite right now. What way does he speak in? A very eloquent way.
Oh, wait, I forget a really good word for this. Oh, what is it? Pathos, pathotic?
Yes.
Wait, let me look up. Pathos define.
Yes.
Pathos, the quality that evokes, pity or, okay, I didn't really mean pity or sadness. I like something that like, it makes it sound like, I guess like evocative. That's a good, I mean, evocative is a good word in itself.
And I think Wikipedia sums this up well, really. And it's a political thriller. And when I knew what this movie was about, and then before I watched it, and when I saw, Wikipedia be described as a political thriller, this was again before I watched it. I was like, well, that's a bit weird. I didn't think it would be a thriller. I thought it'd be kind of a slow paced. There's not much drama happening, but no, it is kind of a thriller. Like there are some exciting stuff that is happening.
Oh yeah, there's an explosion, which was kind of crazy.
Yeah. Again, the explosion. That's kind of fucking like that's just a crazy thing to happen.
Radical Muslims.
Yeah, again, like, would that ever happen? Like, what are the chances of all these? I
was gonna say, like, I assume they have a lot of like security around this area.
Yeah, but it's what are the chances of all these scandals happening? At the same time, like again, one scandal would be massive, but all of these scandals at the same time, then you got a fucking bomb thrown in. Again, it is kind of but again, it goes against what I kind of expected, which was a more intelligent, more slow paced, more like there's things behind the curtain, and
I expected someone to be like, according to the Catechism of 1754, you're gonna lead us into some disrepute.
Like there was more sniping from the sidelines. It was more again subtle rather than just someone's paying someone off.
Yes.
Okay. Well, then that's kind of crazy. But yeah, let's get into it, Michael.
So, after the unexpected death of the Pope, Cardinal Lawrence is tasked with managing the covert and ancient ritual of electing a new one, sequestered in the Vatican with the Catholic Church's most powerful leaders until the process is complete. Lawrence finds himself at the center of a conspiracy that could lead to its downfall. I will say, like, you mentioned all of like the controversies. I feel like if I was like in there, I'd be like, actually, no, maybe this Catholic Church thing, maybe it's time you kind of gave up on this. If I was like all of the top contenders and it's like, oh no, they're all corrupt, and also we're being bombed.
Yeah.
I'd be like, this is like maybe the Catholic Church is gonna really downfall.
Yeah, I just think it's too dramatic.
Yes.
Overall, it's fun, but it's too dramatic. And again, a movie which is based on the choosing of you really think it wouldn't be that dramatic? Because look, I don't know what goes on, but if these are the scandals, then that'd be crazy. I think that would it would have leaked.
Yes.
And I keep on making this point, and again, maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, it does seem that this movie goes way over the top. Some people would not find it that interesting if it wasn't as dramatic. But I think I would, because I enjoy like these political movies.
It's super relevant. Have you seen the movie The Two Popes?
No.
Okay, good. Basically, I was just gonna say that's like a movie about like the last Pope Ratzinger and the current Pope, and they're like talking, and like basically it's got Anthony Hopkins as Pope Ratzinger. I can't remember his actual name, but yeah, I was just gonna say that actually is like a thing about a new Pope coming along, but it's also very subtle. So I've seen that movie and I did like it, so I can confirm I would like a movie that didn't have car bombs exploding.
Yes. Okay, shall we move on to the script?
Yes. So. After the Pope dies, the College of Cardinals convenes to elect his successor. The four leading candidates are Aldo Bellini of the US, a liberal. Okay, I'm not going to do the accent for that. Joshua Adeyemi, I got it wrong. Adeyemi of Nigeria, a social conservative. Joseph Tremblay of Canada, a moderate. And Joseph Tremblay, there we go, because it's like his name's Tremblay, but he says A because he's Canadian, a moderate. And Goffredo Tedesco of Italy, a traditionalist. Yeah, those are your competing factions.
Yes.
I've already expressed my criticism that they're all a bit. There's not much subtlety in terms of communicating what they're about.
Yeah,
like
again,
Godfrey Tedesco is already like, I don't think we should have a black pope because black people are kind of smelly. I don't know what his reasoning was.
No, but yeah, he's clearly racist.
Yeah.
But yeah, you got a good mix of candidates.
Yes.
Which, I don't know. Again, if it's realistic or not, I don't pay attention to papal politics, but
no. It
just seems, again, you've got these clearly defined characters. This guy is liberal. This guy is a conservative. This guy is a conservative, but he's from Africa. And then you've got the moderate, who's Tremblay, who's in the middle. So, you've got very clear defined positions. It's like political parties, rather than, all of them having almost kind of the same views, but there's just a little bit of difference here and there. Well, maybe that is political parties, honestly. But, no, but, yeah, thank you.
Wow, zing.
Yeah, but, certainly I think you look at what Trump's been doing recently in the US, and it's like, there's probably a pretty big difference to what Kamala would have done if she'd won. And I think, you can look at Tedesco and fucking Bellini, and it's like, there's a pretty big distinction between them, and I'm not sure, again, if there would be that big a distinction, because they kind of, they'll be extremists, but I mean, I guess that's why I just think you'd get like 4 Tremblays, honestly. Like 4,
I can imagine that,
4 moderates rather than just like these very outlandish candidates. But anyway,
because could you imagine actually being a Catholic and it's like the entire position of your church on literally every single thing, just like any time there's a new pope completely hangs in the balance. You'd be like, that's got to drive you crazy. Anyway, so Janusz Wozniak, the prefect of the papal household, claims the late pope demanded Tremblay's resignation on the night he died, which Tremblay denies, while Bellini tells his supporters his goal is to prevent Tedesco from becoming pope. Meanwhile, Lawrence is surprised by the last-minute arrival of Archbishop Vincent Benitez of Kabul. So this is just like establishing the intrigue. You're like, oh, there's something going on. Like, who's this guy? Where'd he come from? What's all this? Which is fine. It's an easy way. It's what J.J. Abrams taught us. Yeah. Mystery box. Look at all these mystery boxes.
It is just what J.J. Abrams did. But the point is, and the movie gets into it right away. Look, this organization is, the Catholic Church. It's meant to be about, serving God and Jesus Christ, and they're not meant to have these big egos because it's all about, being the most upstanding person you can be, and basically following what the teachings of God and Jesus. But yet there's all this political intrigue, and there's these factions, and they're fighting against each other, and that the organization is political, and they're basically acting like they should not be acting. And again, the winner, of course, which we'll get to eventually, kind of sums that up in a very on the nose speech. But yeah, let's move on.
Yeah. So on the second day, the college witnesses a confrontation between Adeyemi and Sister Shanumi, a nun recently transferred from Nigeria to Vatican City. Lawrence privately speaks with Shanumi, who confesses to an illicit relationship that led to the birth of a son. The rumors derail Adeyemi's candidacy. Lawrence discovers Tremblay arranged for Shanumi's transfer. Lawrence breaks into the late Pope's quarters and discovers Tremblay committed simony. I almost read that as sodomy for a second. Yeah, so this is, I guess, it's kind of like you got your three acts, right? Now the information's emerging, and of course the one thing you haven't mentioned yet is like in between us there's just like everyone's voting. Yeah. So you find out like where everyone stands.
Yeah. Tremblay probably also committed sodomy too.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, but yeah, just all these shenanigans going on, and again, it's the issue is that this shenanigans are just too dramatic, And I know I'm asking for a movie to be less, exciting, I guess. But I don't think part of the what's interesting about this is it could be realistic. This is what actually goes on in the Catholic Church when they're electing a pope. It's this political and
like believability.
Yeah, but no, I don't think things would be this crazy ever.
Yeah, I also found it really it was kind of, it felt very cliche to me that there's a hidden, the lost pope hid this incriminating document. Did he hide it in his bedpost?
Yes.
Yeah, which is, it just seems like it's a very that. I was like, that's cliche. There's a mystery, and it's you go into the person's room and it's oh look, it's pull up the floorboards and you discover the mystery.
Yeah, Ralph Fiennes, by the way, I will say, he is doing a good job.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think people pointed this out, and to be honest, I kind of thought of it while watching it, and I think I would have come to this conclusion anyway. There's this famous tweet. I don't know if I'd go that far, but basically this tweet is I accidentally became important at my work, and it's awful. It's my and I ruined my life, and I feel like that sometimes, honestly. You don't want to. It's good to be important at work, because you have value, but then everyone's asking you to do stuff, and it's just like, Jesus Christ, just leave me the fuck alone. And that's what the case. Ralph Fiennes is like that. He has this power, but he doesn't want it. He doesn't want to be this manager, and he's just happy, being low key, even though he has, he almost becomes Pope himself. But yeah, it is that meme, or that I don't know, that tweet. To be more accurate, that is Ralph Fiennes' character, and he does it very well. He just looks so tired and done with it every single scene, which is which I think really works for obviously what this movie is trying to do. So
but maybe he was just bored. It's like maybe the working conditions weren't great. Anyway, Lawrence votes for himself during the sixth ballot, which is interrupted by an explosion that knocks him to the floor and damages the Sistine Chapel. The college learns the explosion was caused by a suicide. Tedesco calls for a religious war, while Benitez says that violence should not be met with violence. The college elects Benitez on the seventh ballot, and he chooses the papal name of Innocent. Yeah, so when that explosion happened, I'm not gonna lie, my first thought was kind of an instinctual, come on. But he's getting punished for being conceited and voting for himself.
Yeah, well, I thought the whole thing was so dramatic, and I already thought the movie was, too dramatic. And when it happened, I was like, wait, is this a dream? He's experiencing, because it's just, what a crazy thing to happen. This must be a dream, but no, it happened in real life. So, yeah, and of course we have to talk about then Benitez, who, of course, Tedesco's no, what is needed is a war.
I want to see the movie where he wins.
I don't know if, again, a Christian, or a Catholic specifically, maybe some crazy Christian in America, but a Catholic, would have these views, because these are quite radical views. Yeah. And you could perhaps believe it, but I just don't think he would ever have a chance of winning if he was saying shit like this.
Yeah, like that's the thing. It seems, and again, it's like it's this really weird view of the Catholic Church where, because like you look at like Pope Francis right now, and obviously because obviously this movie, I guess like the Pope is like a made up Pope, but like clearly this movie's about the liberalization of the Catholic Church, and Pope Francis is like clearly like, oh, we should have compassion for Muslims and blah blah blah. So the idea that like just suddenly it will flip to like we should murder them.
Yeah, but I just think like every Pope would kind of like, because you have to like think like that if you're in the, or at least say it if you're in the Catholic Church. Like it would be crazy if someone just came out and was like this. You're basically not a Christian then if you think, well, you're not a Catholic. I mean, that's the thing.
Or like you're a sedevacantist like Mel Gibson.
Yeah, I think in America you have a lot of these people who I would not actually consider Christian. They don't follow the teachings of Christ, who would say stuff like this. But in the Catholic Church in Europe, I think it's a whole different ballgame. And again, I can imagine someone like this existing, but having being the favorite, and then just Benitez just says like the obvious thing. We don't. No, actually, we are fighting against that kind of thing. Like it's you can understand why the Cardinals would vote for him, because it's just such a simple thing to contrast it with Tedesco. Again, it's not that deep. Again, it's the issue is it's just the whole point of the movie, which is actually we should stop all this political infighting and focus on loving God, because that's what really matters. And thank God every other single candidate was just so myopic and so
I was gonna say, like, to me, like the fact that Benitez, like when like they were counting the votes, I was like, I feel like Benitez is gonna win.
Yes.
And then like when it's like they kind of get the slow reveal, because they were like looking like, do you accept the title of Pope? And then it like turns around to him, and I was like, yeah, okay. I mean, that seems kind of crazy, the idea that you could just like suddenly sway everyone with one speech
with just such a simple thing. Again, that's the point I'm making. I think this, when he gives the speech, it seems it's kind of crazy. It's like, wow, that's what a great thing to say. And
it's literally just like what Jesus would say. So it's kind of like for a Christian, that's like a very weird thing to be like, wow, I've never heard, like it's like they've like never read the Bible. I've never heard anyone say, are you saying we should love our enemies? Like this is crazy.
And I guess the message is everyone is so influenced by the politics of the Vatican, and this guy's a new guy that's come in, and so he's unblemished. He can speak as a true Christian would speak, because he's not involved in the dirty political infighting. But again, these guys, their whole, like what he says, that's these guys' whole lives. Like this is what they say every day. So I don't think they'd be amazed by that. It's so on the nose. It's so deliberate, and I'm just like, God, yeah, and he's gonna win, and he did win. So let's move on.
Yes, so Lawrence is initially enthused until Benitez reveals that he was born with a uterus and ovaries. Benitez decided against surgery as he believed God made him the way he made him. Lawrence wanders the grounds of the Vatican, listening to the crowds cheer innocent selection before returning to his bedroom. Yeah, so like when this happened, like at first when they were like, there's something you should know about Benitez, I thought it was like, oh yeah, like Benitez is like the guy who just showed up at the last minute as a cardinal and like no one knew anything. And I was thinking like, oh, this is going to be like I was like thinking this is going to be some kind of like crazy revelation, because like when you think about the fact of obviously this, like someone who's just like shown up last minute. And then I was like, oh my God, he's a woman, like a female pope. And that's like crazy, but then it turns out like it's more of a difference of like an intersex condition, which isn't as exciting. I was like I was thinking to myself like, oh no, I like the idea of this being like what's the word, like one of those like movies like She's the Man, where it's just like it becomes like a comedy movie about like.
I mean that if that was the case, then he'd be lying. Yeah. So he found out during an appendix. Again, what are the odds, man? You've just elected this new pope. He's brilliant, and again, it's the final twist. But actually, he's he has ovaries. He's not actually fully a man. He has female sexual organs. It's just it's just so unbelievable, honestly. And I know, again, the movie's been so dramatic, so it has to one up itself at the end. But I don't know, man. I just find it like I get the point it's trying to make, because what does he call himself, Michael?
Innocent.
Yeah, so I think the point is like he hasn't done anything wrong. Why should he be ashamed of himself? Like he is innocent. Like God made him the way he is, and you have to accept that. Like if you're truly open, like to change and so on, and maybe it leaves the door open. The movie's suggesting, well, maybe women should actually have more of a role in the Catholic Church as well.
Yes, and there is a line about that where someone says, "Hey, like she's the one who takes down Tremblay," basically.
Yeah, we're just meant to be the eyes and ears. But,
yes.
Sorry. We do have eyes and ears, despite meaning to just be silent. So yeah, no, I mean that's the message, and again, it's quite on the nose, and honestly, some Catholics didn't really like it so much. So as we'll move on to here.
Yes, so John Molderig of the Catholic OSV News said about Conclave that rival viewpoints within the church are caricatured with a broad brush, and the deck is particularly stacked in favor of those who advocate change. Yeah, I was thinking that, like, this movie, like, obviously, like, you know, movies are political, but like if you wanted to make an argument for like Hollywood's so woke, this would be a movie you could point to because it is basically the case of
yeah, but
you know,
okay,
but, like, yeah,
I will say this. So I think he's right, John Muldrick. He's right that, you know, things are stacked in favour of those who are advocate change, and again, they elect without their knowledge, obviously, and an intersex pope at the end of it.
Yes.
So it's, you know, that's very much not what you would expect the Catholic Church to do, even if, you know, the cardinals did not know. But at the same time, I think it's actually a positive view of the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church is so conservative, and you've got this guy John Muldrick, who's, you know, probably a conservative, you know, with the, these Catholic conservatives which exist, you know, who are like, oh, you know, we believe in so and so because, you know, we're Catholics, you know, we're a very traditional, you know, group of people, etc. But most people are not like that, and actually, this movie, I think, by portraying, you know, a lot of Catholics in the church as basically liberal with maybe a small L, you know, like, oh yeah, we don't, let's not hate gay people, let's not be racist, you know, let's respect women, you know, that's what we're advocating for, and basically saying, oh yeah, we've had Nazis in the past and paedophiles, and that's obviously bad, you know, acting like they're scandals which they despise, even though these scandals have kind of been covered up. Well, certainly the paedophilia scandal has been covered up. I mean, these people have been in the church for like decades, obviously, because they're all quite old. They must have been in relatively high positions when these scandals were going on, but they treat it as like this bad thing, which they, you know, knew nothing about. Yeah. So it actually portrays the Catholic Church quite well. But it is just, these Catholics are just so conservative that they still dislike that. But at the same time, well, it will improve people's favorability of the Catholic Church watching this movie, I think. So, you know, it's a double-edged sword, I think, in that regard. For Catholics.
Yeah, I think like a lot of these movies that kind of show like the Catholic, like they have like stories about, I'm sure there's like other movies like this where it's like about religious people having kind of crises of faith that kind of humanize them, which obviously we didn't really mention, but like Lawrence is having a kind of ambiguous, like it's not really clear the substance of his like faith thing, but like that's okay. But yeah, obviously like that's something which actually, if you're someone who's maybe on the fence about the Catholic Church, maybe you're a lapsed Catholic or whatever, or you're like somebody's like, oh, I really like the buildings, but I don't really believe in this whole God stuff. You're like, oh wait, even Catholics have doubts. And obviously like the doubts are kind of related to it, because what does he say? He says like certainty is, I can't remember his exact wording, but he gives that speech towards the beginning about how like certainty is bad. And obviously, again, if you're like someone who's, you know, like more secular in your mindset, maybe that means, oh, maybe I do have a place in the Catholic Church, which, yeah,
but you know, when you actually get there, it's like, no, actually, you don't.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah,
so
this is catfishing.
Catholics are like, we want a more realistic, you know, portrayal of the Catholic Church, where, you know, the liberals aren't always, you know, in the moral rights, you know. But then again, the fact that the liberals are morally correct, that sways more people who are on the fence towards them. So yeah, you can't. Yeah, you're in a position where you just have to accept that, okay, you're going to be kind of irrelevant if you don't want these people, these liberals who are advocating for change in your church. But yeah, let's talk about the social media thing.
Yeah, so now, following the film's release, several outlets noted the film's presence on social media and within meme culture. Memes comparing the film to RuPaul's Drag Race and The Real Housewives appeared on Twitter, while other users created fan cams, including one set to such artists as Charlie XCX. Now, I'm going to be honest, Luke, this might shock you to your core. I didn't know about any of this.
Neither did I.
Okay, it's good. So,
online comparisons were also made to Mean Girls, with the elimination of the various of the various cardinals in the film was compared to reality TV shows like Survivor or The Bachelor. So there you go.
Yeah, this is like really weird because like you'd think, I don't know, like these people like not know about politics.
Yeah. I guess, you know, it's like, oh, these people who are very dignified, you know, they're messy backstabbers, it's just like a soap opera, which again is kind of the whole point of the movie. But yeah, I just found that interesting. So let's conclude, Michael. You go first.
Yeah. So I think like pretty much the same thing I said at the beginning. In terms of criticisms, this movie, John Muldrick, the one thing he was definitely right about is this movie paints things with a broad brush. It just so happens that today I saw like a video on my YouTube that was like and I saw it. I found it. It says, "Message to all PC USA pastors: vote against Olympia Overture." Now I don't know what any of that's about, but I'm like guaranteeing like that's like some really obscure, like, so that's the Presbyterian Church of the USA. That's probably some like really obscure ruling on some very minor point. But I imagine it's like a whole drama, and I felt this movie might have been more interesting if it was a little bit more like measured with the drama. I mean, we've basically already said
Yeah,
that.
yeah. What are you giving out of 10?
Yes. So for me, I'm going to give it a middling 6. I was jumping back and forth between high and middling, but yeah, I just think it's a little bit silly.
Yeah, I do as well, unfortunately, and I think a 7 out of 10 is fair. Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's just too dramatic. It just goes too far.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, it's people saying, oh, it's intelligent. Well, no, it's not. It's really not that intelligent. It's not that subtle. There are broader characterizations, as that John Muldreg guy said, which is true, and the scandals are quite obvious as well. Everything is just right in front of you. And it's not really done with a careful touch, really. I just don't think people. I just don't think. I think people again are drawn in by the fact that Ralph Fiennes is saying everything in a dignified and pathetic way, as you said.
And he's so sexy.
Yeah. So a 7 out of 10. What are we doing next time?
Next week, not next week. Next time, we're doing one of the pairings you already mentioned, Anora and The Substance.
Yes, join us for that next time. So yeah, we'll continue on our 2025 Oscars. Watch. So yeah, join us for that next time. Who have you been, Michael?
I've been Michael.
I've been Luke. Thanks for listening and goodbye.
Guten Tag.